Hello, everyone. Natalie here with Premier Talent Partners. Thanks for tuning in to our next session, of LinkedIn Live with Premier. Again, this is our series dedicated to client-facing topics. And as I remember, these past couple of months, we've been unpacking our newest free resource called HR in a Box. So every single month, as a reminder, we're gonna pick apart a different toolkit, a different section, and I've invited a guest speaker to join me, and they're really a subject matter expert in that space, and they're gonna help me unpack these different topics and templates and resources for you guys to use. So I would like to make a warm introduction to Mr. Damon O'Donnell. He's one of our recruiting directors in our Northeast region. Well, soon you're going to be Midwest, yeah? Yes.
Correct, which explains my background, the move in a couple days.
Yes, exactly. So Damon, welcome to this session. I've invited you here today to help me unpack our recruiting toolkit. But before we dive into that, I just wanted to give our audience a little context about who you are and your background. The reason I invited Damon and picked him in particular is because he has both agency and corporate non-agency experience, and he is the process operations guru. Whenever there's something that our organization in particular really needs to flesh out from an operational perspective, he's the guy. He's so good at it. And so because this next chapter is about the recruiting toolkit, there's a lot of operational recruiting process stuff. Not necessarily like we talked about last month, the actual things to say and not to say and more compliance stuff, but this is more process operational. And Damon has worked for companies like Pinterest, Moet Hennessy. I had no idea. Where's our free samples? So I will share his profile, and please, connect with him, befriend him on LinkedIn. But Damon, would you like to give us a few words about yourself and kind of what you specialize in here at Premier, and then we'll dive in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Natalie, for the warm welcome and those kind words. It is true, I am ex-Pinterest and ex-LVMH. So I have worked for some very large and rather complex organizations, which I think gave me some great preparation coming into Premier to work with a lot of our different clients. We work with clients from, all ends of the spectrum. But I really never met a process I didn't love. I had sort of an operations and strategy background. So initially my role at Premier was very focused on operations and strategy and managing a team of recruiters in New York. Now I'm much more also doing that, but very much a full cycle recruiter as well. So I have visibility into some different areas of our business, but I'm very excited to be here with all of you today to talk about some of the processes we've outlined with respect to the recruiting toolkit and the communications that we prepared for you, and some other elements that we're excited to dive into. So thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you. So as I pull this up, I'm going to do a screen share again. But can you give us some context on who this toolkit really is helpful for? Of course, larger organizations, they have in-house recruiting teams and infrastructures and processes. Who do you think would best benefit from this recruiting toolkit the way that we've crafted it thus far?
Great question. I think at a high level, it's really beneficial for any audience, but a lot of small to mid-sized companies might find this really, really helpful. Recruiting is both an art and a science, and a lot of our smaller to mid-sized clients don't necessarily do a lot of recruiting, and so that's why they come to us for our expertise. But we wanted to provide this free resource so that for anyone who wants to jump into it, we wanted to outline the different parts of the process. It is very complex. There are a lot of moving parts. And so we've done, I think, a really good job here of going into the different areas of the life cycle and making sure that we're equipping our clients of all sizes, but again, specifically that smaller audience, with all the tools that they need to make a successful hire.
Perfect. So let's jump into the actual toolkit and pick it apart. So this, from an operational perspective, will touch, as you mentioned, different stages of the recruiting life cycle. So first, let's dive into the communications section. What we've put together is not only just templates, but really a general overview of what are some of the communications that you will have with a candidate throughout the candidate's life cycle as it relates to your search. So can you go into detail a little bit about what are possibly some of those different communications that you might have with the candidate? And I'll kind of click through here and show some sample templates, but what's great is when you guys download this, you can literally, copy paste, pump them into your email, and then you could start using them. But Damon, can you kind of give us an idea of what are some general communications you might have?
Absolutely. So as many of you may assume, the recruiting process is very communications heavy. There are so many communications that are flying back and forth from the very beginning to the very end. So I am a sort of actualized word nerd. I love words. I love putting together emails and things of that nature, but we understand that not everyone falls into that category. So what we've done here is we provided several different templates that cover all of the different communications that you might have from the very beginning of outreach, which is what's covered here in our introductory email template. So this is sort of establishing a first contact with a candidate once you've reviewed their credentials and you've decided that they would be a good fit for a role. And then we provided a subsequent categories of setting up a screening interview. So that initial call to sort of gauge someone's experience and fit for a given position. And then, as you can see, we go through the rest of the process, an interview with HR, which is always very important. There's the in-person interview template here. And in a post-COVID environment, very important that we have also the video call confirmation email, because a lot of our clients are interviewing and hiring remotely. We expect that to continue as we go into the future. So that's something that's really become a lot more relevant. And then, of course, when we get to the post-interview thank you stage, for thank you notes and things of that nature, we provided really kind of a soup to nuts guide. So these are all very customizable. There are variable sections for each. You can kind of put your own spin on it, which is something that we really wanted to equip everyone with. And then finally here, we have some language for when someone is applying to a job posting. Obviously, we'd love to say yes to everyone, but we can't always do that. So these provide some really great language for, just declining someone's application and saying, it was not a fit this time around, but we'd love to stay engaged and possibly chat about a future role. So we have a lot of different categories. There's a lot of content, so I won't dive super deep, but please review it. We really have some great content here to deploy. Natalie, I think you're muted.
Sorry, there's noise in the background. I always forget that I'm on mute. Okay, so we've gotten to the stage where you've probably extended some sort of communication with the candidate thus far. Either you've declined them at the application stage, you have declined them after an interview, you may have invited them to an interview. And so what do we do now? How do we prepare for the interview process? What I want to note here is in last month's session, we actually talked about the do's and don'ts, things to say and not say in an interview. This section here is actually a comprehensive guide on how to prepare. What are those best practices as you prepare for the upcoming interviews? So can you walk us through this comprehensive guide, and then I'll kind of go to the next section.
Sure. So this guide is intended to really provide an overview of the actual interview process. Of course, this is central and key to the whole recruiting life cycle is the interview. And we want to start with preparation and provide a checklist here of, how can you align as an internal team? That is the most important first step to make sure that as a team, you are clear on exactly what the roles and responsibilities are for a given position, what questions you may want to ask in an interview, things like that. So we provided a really, really helpful checklist there. Then as we move down through the guide, we're actually in the interview. So you might want to use a tool like, for example, a live doc or a spreadsheet where you can take notes in real time. One thing I always emphasize to both clients and candidates when I'm on a video call or on a phone call is I'm often taking notes. I want to just call out that I'm taking notes so that it's very clear that they have my full attention. So it's really helpful during an interview to have a note taker who's designated who can kind of document that information in real time. And then as we go through it, just tips and tricks for best practices. Active listening is a really important part of the interview process. These last two categories, consistency, compliance, really, really key. We want to make sure that the interview is a level playing field and that we're providing the same blueprint for everyone. asking the same questions and establishing that consistency. Keeping small talk to a minimum is really important. Unconscious biases are something that we're talking a lot about. They're very real. If we can kind of minimize small talk and keep it sort of the end of the interview, that minimizes the window of opportunity for those things to creep in. And then finally, we have a rating system here. So this can provide us with actual data points, as someone is answering questions in an interview, just to sort of stack rank them, against one another. So after the interview, when we're debriefing as a team, we can sort of figure out, okay, where did this person rank on that scale? And then with the assessment, this is something a lot of our clients are deploying these days. If it's a specific role, like for example, an email marketing manager, the client might ask the candidate to conceive an email marketing, campaign and send that back with their ideas, gives them an idea of how they think and how they would approach that role. And then in part 2 here, the pre-interview strategy session, this is really geared toward the internal team's preparation. So we've broken it out into 2 sections to just really help the team align on all these important points, from high level to kind of, how do we measure success in this role? Where do we want to be at the 3, 6, and 12-month marks, things like that. So it's a comprehensive guide to help both internal teams and also the candidate by giving them the best experience in the interview.
And I think this section, the second section, the pre-interview strategy, is so key for those smaller businesses or the smaller startup companies that may not have experienced interviewers yet, or maybe this is the first time these managers are ever interviewing and or hiring. Maybe they got a promotional opportunity from another company and they've yet to have interviewed and screened candidates. But also if you don't have an internal recruiting team, and this part is crucial because it's kind of your own little mini version of infrastructure, right? So what are the things that we need to do as a leadership team to set us up for success? Because as a leader of an organization, you're hired in whatever area. Maybe you're the VP of sales, maybe you're the CEO, maybe you're the finance director. And so you're a subject matter expert in your space. We don't expect everybody to be an expert in all things recruiting. So this strategy session is really helpful when you decide who is going to be a part of the interview process. Let's sit down together, let's have a huddle, let's talk through all these things so everybody's on the same page and you don't accidentally say things that you may or may not want to say, and or screen all differently. So this part is really great if you want to download that and print it out. All right, next section is the verbal offer. Awesome. We fell in love with some candidates. We want to move forward. What do we do? What are some standard guidelines? And as you can see, we don't have to dive deep into the scripts themselves, but we have also provided some here. But at a high level, Damon, what are some of the best practices for the verbal offer stage?
Yeah, so this is definitely one of the most exciting parts of our job when someone is extended an offer. So to kind of highlight some of the best practices, we prefer to do these over the phone. So we like to contact the candidate, let them know that they've been selected. It's a really exciting moment. We want to make sure that we're establishing consistency in this process, just like in the interview process. So that's why we provided this helpful checklist. And then, of course, we have 3 outcomes. The candidate may accept enthusiastically, which is fantastic. And then we can move to an official offer letter, which we provided at the end here. They may need some time to think about it, which is completely reasonable. So usually 24 to 48 hours is a reasonable window. And then, we want to make sure we're following up. That's a huge part of this whole process, is the follow-up. In the cases where the candidate does decline the offer, it's of course, an outcome that we don't hope for, but it does happen for a number of reasons. So I think this is a learning opportunity. We can dig into, was there another opportunity that you found more exciting? If so, can you tell us about that? It's a great way for us to get some data on how we may improve the interview process moving forward. So I think these are all really helpful templates as well.
Yes. And most companies, well, not most, actually, I've worked for some companies who didn't actually send a formal written offer letter, which I thought was very interesting, but it was the way it was. But when you are ready, whether it's yourself as the hiring manager or you're a senior leader in the organization, or you have an HR specialist that will do this for you, there's also a template on what to make sure to mention in that email when you attach the offer letter. So that's up for you as an organization to decide. Do we send formal written letters after, or do we just go with the verbal? So we've covered all of it here for you. Okay, and then lastly, reference checks. I guess reference checks can happen before an offer or sometimes after an offer. So nonetheless, wherever you choose to put it as part of your process, we have basically created a whole entire template for you that you can just print and use. And when you're making those phone calls, and or if you want a reference check via email, here's some general ideas on questions that you can ask. Damon, anything you want to add here?
Sure, I can just quickly say that I think this reference check form really does cover all the important bases. It digs into, what was the nature of your working relationship. We provide a rating system. So this is really helpful for our clients as they're, in the offer stages. This is really a very important formality that a lot of our clients like to conduct to make sure that they have a 360 view on a candidate that they're very serious about taking on. And lastly, I'll just say that from a legal standpoint, it's very important to make sure that we're crossing our T's, dotting our I's, and making sure that we have permission from the candidate to collect references and speak with those people. But definitely an important part of the process, and also an exciting one, because when we've reached the reference check form, usually that means that we are on the road to an offer. So very important, and an exciting piece of the puzzle.
Yes, and one last thing I will add there from a company perspective, when you go to do a reference check, don't be surprised if the other alternative organization that you're reaching out to declines to give a formal reference or an in-depth reference, excuse me. There are a lot of laws and legalities and little sticky situations that companies can get into if they overshare too much information. So some organizations have opted to just say yes or no, they're eligible for rehire, what are their dates of employment, and maybe even what their compensation was and their job title. So don't be surprised if you run into those scenarios, and or your own organization, when you choose to implement this as a best practice in your company, how in-depth do you want to go? And you may also want to check with your state laws and employment laws specific to your geographical region, because sometimes there are different things that you want to be mindful of. So reference checks are great when you can get really meaty information about that candidate, but it can also be somewhat of a liability for companies. So it's kind of a dying trait, I guess, unfortunately. So, but some companies still do it, and you can still get around it. So that is it for our recruiting toolkit, which was part 2 of our, so that was our second session. Next month, I'm going to have another guest speaker that's going to help us, actually there's going to be 2 people next time, that is going to help us pick apart the onboarding toolkit. So specifically when you have a new hire, what do we do? How do we onboard them? How do we set them up for success? How do we make sure they feel loved and taken care of? So we'll dive into that more. But with that, I leave you with any parting words from Damon about our recruiting process and toolkit. Anything you want to share? Any final words?
I'll just say that I really think that we have done an excellent job of putting this together. We've tried to cover all the bases and, take as much of the busy work out of this process as possible so that our clients can focus on the things that are most important for them and leave the recruiting expertise to us, because that is what we love to do. So it's been an absolute pleasure being here today to discuss this. Natalie, thank you. And thank you to everyone else. We look forward to working with all of you in the future.
Thank you. Good luck with the move. Thanks for making time for this, even though you're very busy right now. Lastly, I just put the link for HR in the Box that you can download. So if you don't already have that link, check it out there. Thank you, Dodd. Dodd is his nickname. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you sharing and imparting your wisdom with us. So have a great rest of your week, everybody. And thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.